So, folks, as we all know by now, Tucker Carlson was fired by Fox News yesterday. And let's just get one thing straight here. Whatever the spin, he was indeed fired. If this were an amicable split, he'd have certainly been afforded the opportunity to bid farewell to his millions of nightly viewers. Instead, in very unceremonious fashion, the network issued a press release on Monday morning which read simply, Fox News Media and Tucker Carlson have agreed to part ways. We thank him for his service to the network, blah, blah, blah. They also made mention of the fact that Friday, April 21st, was his last broadcast, so he would not be allowed on air to give his final farewell. That is a sign that things did not end well. All right. Now, love him or hate him. And there are a lot of people who love him and a lot of people hate him. In our space, the latter sentiment is far more prevalent, no doubt. But love him or hate him, Tucker was the sole relevant news personality on cable TV. Now, in a media landscape that's now dominated by podcasts, YouTube channels, bloggers, social media influencers, Tucker was truly the last of his breed. He was a nightly TV anchor who commanded the country's attention with each primetime broadcast. And of course, rival outlets branded him right to the end and even after the end as a right-wing extremist. CNN called him a right-wing extremist when they broke the news that he had been dismissed. But despite this branding, Nielsen ratings actually showed that Tucker Carlson Tonight was the #1 show in its time slot among Democrats as of last year. So yes, that is correct. More registered Democrats watched Tucker than watched Chris Hayes or even Rachel Maddow. Now, those who followed his program knew that while he was certainly a right-winger in a number of ways, there's no denying that. He had very, very conservative views on a great number of issues. He was also the lone presence in cable who gave voice to some truly dissident points of view, including opposition to the indefinite funding of the Russia-Ukraine war, advocacy for the pardoning of Julian Assange. Most recently, of course, we covered this last week, the defense of the African People's Socialist Party after they were indicted on Russiagate-like charges. Now, in addition to these specific examples of specific issues where he took an unpredictable stance, Tucker would, on occasion, defy conservative orthodoxy by challenging, for example, their blind loyalty to capitalism, as he did most notably on a Ben Shapiro program about 4 years back. Here's a couple of brief clips from that appearance to give you an idea what I'm talking about.
If you wake up one morning and you find yourself in a society where 23-year-olds with 4-year college degrees and like initiative who aren't smoking weed every day, if they can't make enough to buy a car, much less a home, much less get married, much less have children, then why should you be surprised when half of them say they prefer socialism?
All right, so that's the first clip. The second clip is after Shapiro asks him about automation and AI, and should we stop automation if it means protecting decent paying blue collar jobs? And he gives an answer about capitalism itself, how yes, in some cases, capitalism does need to be restrained because it's not a religion. He frames it in exactly this way. Let's hear this.
Capitalism is the best economic system I can think of, I think that anyone's ever thought of. But that doesn't mean that it's a religion and everything about it is good.
No, but
there's no Nicene Creed of capitalism that I have to buy into. What I care about is living in a country where, you know, decent people can live happy lives, actually.
All right, so there you have it. Now, Tucker is a right-wing populist, and right-wing populists are, of course, pro-capitalist. But right-wing populists tend to be populists first and capitalists second. And so the sentiment that he is articulating there is that, yes, I'm pro-capitalism as long as capitalism serves humanity. Whereas a lot of doctrinaire, sort of more Reaganite Republican types actually have it reversed. They don't articulate it in this way because they really can't, but they actually believe that people exist to serve capitalism. It is a religious servitude that they feel to the economic system itself. Whereas Tucker's like, yeah, I'm a capitalist insofar as capitalism helps human beings. Now, this is where I would strongly disagree with him that capitalism does and can and should be a vehicle for humanity. But that's where I disagree with him, because I'm more a socialist, right? But I think what he's articulating there is a loyalty to populism first, capitalism second. So that's where he breaks with a lot of the more doctrinaire right-wing types. And so Tucker's tendency to buck that sort of conservative orthodoxy and sort of challenge mainstream Republican policy ideas was a huge part of what made his program as successful as it was. Because unlike Chris Hayes and Rachel Maddow on the quote-unquote left, or Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham on the right, Tucker's show had the most enviable benefit of being unpredictable. It was unpredictable. You must have that quality in order to truly succeed and break through in show business, right? Maybe it's because Russell and I are theater people. We talk about this all the time. A show is a show is a show. And if the audience is one step ahead of the action, it's going to get boring sooner or later. The way Tucker maintained dominance in the ratings year after year after year is because he was unpredictable, right? There were many topics which you could sort of see where he was coming from, because he tended to lean, obviously, in a much more conservative direction, but not all the time. On many topics, viewers couldn't be quite sure of his take until they heard it firsthand from him. In other words, Tucker was often one step ahead of the audience, whereas other opinion commentators conform too regularly to their party's policy lines to keep their viewers in the same kind of suspense. And so for this reason, Tucker was and still is, in my view, irreplaceable. It's virtually impossible to imagine another host really filling those shoes. Cable news is not designed for hosts like Tucker Carlson anymore. It's a far more suitable forum for just partisan pawns willing to recite boilerplate talking points which confirm the biases of their already siloed consumer base. Tucker became an unprecedented success by breaking that mold and appealing to a more viewpoint diverse audience. There are others who have had this same success in that same way, but they're all online. They're on the internet. Think Joe Rogan, think Glenn Greenwald, think Jimmy Dore, to name just a few. These are guys who have built their audiences online, where they found a loyal base of support across numerous online platforms. The internet as a whole, while itself, obviously, I would concede, hosts to many a conformist echo chamber, is still an ideological melting pot compared to the siloed world of cable news. This is why online media has surpassed TV in terms of its public influence, right? No one cares what Rachel Maddow or Sean Hannity said yesterday, because we already know their opinions before they say them. They'll never be zeitgeist shows in the way that Tucker's was, because they exist for the specific and shallow purpose of throwing red meat to their tiny slices of the population who are already convinced that their side is always right, no matter what, no questions asked. Now, on the other hand, when someone like a Joe Rogan, for example, endorsed Bernie Sanders in 2020, it made huge news. And it made huge news precisely because it was surprising. Rogan holds many left of center views, but he's not so doctrinaire in his philosophy that his embrace of Sanders was something we could all see coming. Rogan, like most Americans, is a mixed bag of left and right-wing opinions, which gives his pronouncements far more weight than those of committed ideologues whose takes on the day's events, and elections for that matter, obviously, are all but predetermined. Now, to be clear once again, Tucker is no Joe Rogan, right? He's not as much of a wild card as Rogan was, but he is the closest thing to him that existed on cable news, which is why he consistently ranked number one. It's why Tucker Carlson was synonymous with Fox News. Almost every mention of Fox in popular discourse referred to Tucker and something he said. You didn't hear Laura Ingraham's name mentioned all that much, or Sean Hannity's name mentioned all that much. Their shows aren't water cooler talk. They don't tap into the public debate at nearly to the extent that Tucker's did. And that's why. Now, exactly why he was let go, that's yet to be disclosed. Rupert Murdoch was obviously concerned about his January 6th coverage. We know that now. We don't know if that's why they let him go. After settling with Dominion for $787 million, Fox still faces a $2.7 billion defamation suit from Smartmatic, which is another voting tech company. Now, Tucker's firing could be a sort of last minute cover your ass move to suck up to the judges as evidence that Rupert Murdoch wants to build a case that he's taking the network in a different direction. It could be that his views on Russia, Ukraine are too out of step with the rest of the channels. It could have something to do with a monologue last week in which Tucker suggested that perhaps his network was more loyal to their advertisers than they were to the well-being of their viewers. I'm sure that didn't rub the higher ups in the right way. It could be that triggered them. It could be that was just the latest barb in an ongoing conflict between Tucker Carlson and upper management. And so perhaps he was not as surprised as the rest of us to know he had been let go. But anyway, you can watch a dozen different channels who will give you a dozen different theories as to why he was let go. That's not the point I'm interested in making. The point I want to make here is that whatever the reason that he was shit canned, one thing is for sure, which is that his exit marks the end of cable TV as a relevant medium for news and political commentary. We certainly don't cover much MSNBC anymore. We don't cover much Fox or CNN anymore. Tucker was the only guy we covered because he was the only person who was unpredictable and therefore the only person who was worth talking about. Everyone else in that space is just a hack. And now they're all hacks. And in getting rid of Tucker, Fox, whether they wanted to or not, has rendered themselves as disposable as CNN and MSNBC. They're now just another network with just another point of view, interested in no one outside their dwindling demographic of aging Reaganites. For everyone else, the internet is now truly the only game in town. So with Tucker's departure, RIP cable TV. Thank you guys very much for watching.
Please clap.